Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to AdAge's custom webcast sponsored by InMobi. The topic of today's webcast is maximizing your creativity and interactivity on mobile. I'm Bob Norp, and I'm your moderator for today. Now we have just a few quick items to go over before we begin. We will hear from today's presenters, and then we'll open the floor to your questions. To participate in the Q&A portion of the webcast, all you have to do is type your question into the Ask a Question text area below the presentation window and then click the Submit button. You may submit questions at any time during the webcast, and we will address as many questions as time permits after our presenters' prepared remarks. Please also note the series of widgets that are available to you toward the bottom of the console. Now let's get started. I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. First up, we have Ann Frisbee. Ann is Senior Vice President of Global Brand and Programmatic at InMobi. Ann is a digital media industry veteran of over 20 years with experience that includes co-founding an e-commerce company, executing some of the first search marketing campaigns in the industry, and directing publisher development at what is now most famously known as Elon Musk's first startup, Zip2. Now, Michael Tuminello is the VP of Solutions and Partnerships at Innovid, where he works with clients, partners, and industry trade groups to help pioneer a new generation of video and TV marketing. He sits on a number of IAB video working groups, as well as the Mobile Marketing Association's Mobile Video and Programmatic working groups. Now, to get started, I'm going to turn it over to Ann. Ann, take it away.
Thanks, Bob. So excited to be here. I'll start diving into our topic, which is focused on mobile video and creative and interactivity experiences. So in terms of what we'll talk about today, we're going to focus on some of the best practices that we recommend and really being able to get mobile video and mobile creative right. And we're specifically focused on the in-app side of mobile rather than the browser side. Secondarily, we'll go through mobile-only creative formats. So really, what do mobile-optimized experiences look like? What are ways that you can really use the device itself to improve the performance of your campaigns and really impact your media impact? And then what metrics matter? We'll go through some of the benchmarks. So as you're looking at your campaigns on mobile, on in-app, and particularly on the video side of things, what are benchmarks that are out there? What can you expect to try to deliver in terms of key performance metrics against this campaign? So we'll review that at the end of the presentation. First off, we'll start with a poll to see who's out there. You guys can answer this question. What sort of roles do we have in the audience today? And if you can mark whether you work at a brand or a direct client advertiser, whether you work on the agency side or one of the ad tech players in the ecosystem or a publisher, and fill in that answer, and we'll look at the results of that poll so that everyone knows who's on and who's listening to this webinar. All right, do you think we're ready for results? So here's some of the results coming back from the poll, and it sounds like we have a lot of agencies or brands and on the call today. So 2/3 or so or more of that audience. So that's terrific. Hopefully these best practices will help everyone out there. So let's dive into some of the best practices that we've learned at InMobi and also at Innovid. So hopefully we'll be the best and brightest thoughts around this to you. So first up is to think vertically. And majority of consumers hold their mobile devices in a vertical or portrait mode. So most of the time your creatives out there are being experienced in a vertical position. And we really are seeing an increase in the use of vertical video assets. We'll talk about strategies on how to really create vertical experiences if you don't have vertical assets. But just to give you a sense of the value of this, Obviously, most consumers do not turn their phones, so if you do have a horizontal asset without anything else on the page, the experience will look like what's on the left of your screen. And so you really have a 4-time larger visual impact if you use a vertical experience for these full screen in-app experiences. And we're seeing 80% higher conversion rates off of those, depending on what the metric for the advertisers were when it's in a vertical rather than horizontal position. In this case, with Samsung, InMobi actually cut the video, got this horizontal asset on the left, and actually created this vertical experience for Samsung. But that's one technique that's out there, is that your media partners or your partners like Innovid may be able to transfer your horizontal creatives into vertical. We'll look at some other examples of ways to use this vertical experience. This is clearly number one stop on best practices, since most of the time consumers are holding their phone in that portrait mode. So we'll talk about some other examples, and I'll hand it over to Innovid, who can talk about a way that they've helped advertisers create more vertical experiences. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, sure. Oh, sure. Yeah, so I just, first off, hello, everyone. Michael Tuminello. So I just wanted to point out that we know, honestly, we work with a lot of advertisers, and we know that although the best practices are the best practices, and it is great, we do know that plenty of agencies and advertisers, for whatever reason, aren't at the point where they're ready to create vertical specific assets, and they may not have assets that lend themselves to having the edges cropped off. And as such, it's also, I think, it makes sense to be aware of the fact that we can also take a landscape asset potentially and fit other assets around it to still give you a full screen experience, sometimes give you like a persistent call to action, and that can sort of help to bridge the gap between, to give the viewer a vertical experience even despite the fact that we're starting with a horizontal asset. Another thing I think to be aware of is that, of course, you can potentially specify the inventory that you want. So you can also potentially, if you're going to run landscape, try to push to just get the landscaped inventory to make sure that it's full screen. So those are just 2 points relative to orientation I thought might also be worth mentioning.
Great. So this is clearly on the right. It looks like you have multiple videos or horizontal assets to fill the screen. So this is a great example of how to maximize it.
I can explain it because I realize it's not necessarily clear from the image, but sort of the black part is the darker part is the 16:9 standard video, and then what we've done is just built graphical assets on top and below it that complement it. And it can be very beneficial to have, as is this case, like a persistent call to action that even if you sort of don't really understand exactly what you're watching at any given point in the video, it's very clear because you have this persistent call to action that, oh, there's this new DVD out and it's available this date and so on.
So we'll show the audience another example of using a horizontal asset, video asset, with other calls to action to create a vertical experience. So this is an HBO Game of Thrones example where the main call to action for them wasn't video completion rates, but it was getting a 30-day free trial for HBO Now. In this example, they have the horizontal video creative. On the bottom of that, there's a carousel to interact with the different characters of Game of Thrones. And then obviously both on the top and the bottom, there's the call to action that, hey, if you're interested, you can get the 30-day free trial. So these are ways that advertisers are starting to create with their partners vertical video experiences, but using horizontal video assets. And in each, it really is going to depend on what the key performance metrics for success are. In this example, the metric is more focused on free trials. Obviously, you can create vertical experiences that really focus on the video completion rates and that brand impact and engagement, depending on what the goals of the campaign are. So the first best practice is clearly going vertical, and going vertical whether you have vertical video assets yet from your advertisers. So we'll move on now to the second example of a best practice. So the next thing that we wanted to talk about is kind of attention span of consumers. That's clearly decreasing in general. And obviously on mobile, we're starting to see that really the new max for videos is optimally around 15 seconds. At least at InMobi, we do support 30-second videos as well, and we have techniques that we can work with you on to hit the right completion rate metrics on 30 seconds. But without kind of optimizing campaigns, we wanted to show you what the average completion rates would be for 15 seconds versus 30 seconds so that people understand kind of the drop-off in those completion rates. So anyway, what we're seeing at InMobi is that 15-second videos on average have a 75% or higher completion rate. We generally see in the range of 75 to 85%. And then for 30-second videos, unless we really optimize the buy in order to try to deliver kind of 70% plus on completion rate, that same buy on apples-to-apples inventory with the same reach and scale will actually drop with 30-second video creatives to 40 to 50% completion. So while you do have a longer video presumably to impact consumers, the amount of really time earned doesn't increase when you run a 30-second video, just because that drop-off is so large that your ability to get full impact and your complete message is clearly much higher at a 15-second experience. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people coming out with even shorter video formats now, which I think folks are aware of. But right now, we are seeing 15 seconds as kind of that new max, ideally on mobile devices. So as I said, we do run a lot of 30-second videos, and we'll talk about some of what we see. But this is clearly where the industry is going, is towards shorter video clips and video advertising.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely correct. If you don't mind my chiming in, Ann, we see the same thing. We see better performance on programmatic for shorter videos for sure. I think the one small exception here perhaps is if you're running outside of programmatic and you're running in an in-stream where there's video content, typical TV commercial, I think you'll see a bit more traction for 30 seconds for a bit longer. But I absolutely agreed from a programmatic standpoint that the shorter the better, and I think we'll get even better over time at understanding the context of where the ad is shown, and ideally, there'll be a difference even between, say, someone being in a coffee shop or walking around, and that may be the time for even shorter videos versus, say, somebody sitting down reading an article and more engaged, where there'll be room for longer videos. And I think that's someplace we haven't gone yet, but we'll see that happen over the course of the next few years.
Excellent. All right, so we'll move on to the next best practice. So this is, following your comment, is on using more TV creatives, 30-second TV creatives on mobile devices. And it's interesting, this is a bit of an example that's similar to what we saw in going vertical. In this case, the advertiser is using a 30-second television commercial, but then is bringing in more interactive elements so that the focus on the performance metric is less on the video completion rate and more on getting people to take that next step for the vertical experience. So we'll move on to the next thing, but I agree, we do see a lot of 30 seconds being run today, so I wouldn't say that you can't run those on mobile, and we do have ways that we can hit higher completion rates as well. It just affects a little bit your reach in terms of what publishers take those experiences.
Yeah, that's a great example. Sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to jump in and say one thing, and that's something that I think, honestly, people overlook, but as we start to, I think people tend to see interactive as this sort of thing that's kind of a whiz-bang thing that's going to be, let me do something that's never been done before, and I want to see something new and fresh, so they try and do interactive once, and then they're like, okay, I did that, now they're on to the next thing. I think something that gets short shrift in as far as the value of interactive goes, and this unit is a perfect example of it, is that interactive is a great data gathering mechanism, and I think we're going to see that interactive get second legs in the marketplace as basically as that data gathering mechanism, right? So we hear a lot about personalized creative, which is delivering a more personalized message based on data in your DMP. Well, honestly, like the ability to interact with a unit is basically gives the advertiser the ability to listen to signals directly from the consumer that says, maybe in this case, this feature is the one that I'm particularly interested in, which can then inform future more personalized creative and can form advertising across the board as DMPs start to become more and more central and well adopted.
Great, good point. So next up is a best practice that we'll have a fair amount to talk about on this call, so I'll dive right into it. So this is really about the use of VAST for in-app mobile video. What we found, and the industry has really found, is that VPay JavaScript tags, unfortunately, are not able to be leveraged with a fully pre-cached, buffer-free, instantaneous experience. So the video you see on the left is a VAST creative, and it can support viewability. So we'll dive into that. So VPay is certainly not synonymous with viewability, but it is, VAST can support viewability. But on the left side of the screen, you'll see that the VAST video creatives in-app can load in 6/100th of 1 second. So that is instantaneous. The human mind really can't comprehend that short of a duration of time. And this enables, obviously, a much better chance for you to have a positive brand impact and higher completion rates for the consumers and greater reach on your campaigns, because the videos will load and play instantaneously whatever the connection speed of the user is at the time that they're viewing that ad. So whether they're on a Wi-Fi connection that's strong or they're on a carrier connection that doesn't have great connectivity. So that's the great thing with VAST, is I think the industry now is starting to accept the ability to run VAST creative, but we'll talk about how the industry now is enabling VAST to support for in-app viewability and verification signals. And so I'll go to the next slide, Michael, and hand it over to you to talk about this change that's afoot in the industry in general.
Yeah, so I always get the geeky slides, which is good by me. Yeah, so I just wanted to explain real quickly. So I think that, Ann made a very good point. I think this is a misconception in the industry that we're going to have to spend the next few months basically informing people, and it'll take a while for it to catch on. But for so long, VPaid has been synonymous with viewability. But what we're seeing, because of different models at work that apply in mobile, we're seeing that is changing. And so I'm just going to explain really quickly here sort of the different models that are in operation. So the first model, which we see, model 1 here, is VAST, right? And so for VAST, the ad server, is delivering just a video file and tracking pixels. And we deliver that to the SDK in the case of mobile in-app. Problem here is that because we're just delivering assets, there's no code present to execute verification, right? And so what have we done? Well, generally speaking, especially on desktop, we've had to instead move to VPaid, and we've had lots of agencies say we're only going to use VPaid because that allows us basically, what we're doing here is we're wrapping the video in a layer of code, this VPaid code, and then because that code is present, that code is able to execute the verification and viewability, in some cases from integrated partners like IS and Mode and Double Verify. Some cases it could be native to us or native to somebody else. The problem from a mobile standpoint is that loading this code slows things down. The fact that you have to execute the code in order to get at the video slows things down, and that's what Ann just showed with her demo, which is real-world testing that they've done, that getting the code to get the video slows things down too much. So what we need to do is we need to either improve VAST or we need to improve VPaid. And we're working on both of them, but we're here today to talk about improving VAST. And the way VAST has been improved, and this is an industry-wide initiative that InMobi has been one of the very first to adopt, is that they're supporting an open source solution that was led by IAS and is now adopted by all verification partners to embed the code necessary for verification in the SDK, in the app itself. And what that means is you can still deliver video using VAST, but because the code is already resident on the device, you still get the verification and viewability without slowing things down. And because it's VAST, we think it will get it's immediately a lot more scale than VPaid. Although of course we have to wait until we have massive amounts of inventory available with the SDK. I know that InMobi is already rolling theirs out and has very substantial inventory available today, and hopefully we'll see others follow suit. I don't know if you want to go to the next slide or if I have the ability to do that.
Go.
Thanks. Yeah, so this is just so you know I'm not making it up. This is the open source viewability SDK. This was just a snippet from the IAB's announcement. This is going to be announced, I think, it's been announced already, but it's going to be actually released in its first draft during Ad Week next week, and we'll see more and more adoption. But InMobi's been way ahead of the curve on this, and also way ahead on the curve on trying to enable extra creative on the VAST side, which I think we're going to talk about. N-Card being a good example of something that's already well supported in the industry, but hasn't been completely buttoned up and is going to be buttoned up moving forward, and InMobi's an early adopter of that.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the best practice, you can use VAST for mobile video. It will have faster load times, which means better results for you and your clients and the consumers. And then in terms of what Michael was saying, InMobi does support both IAS and Moat in terms of viewability today for in-app inventory. So we did take the open source library already into the SDK probably a year ago, and a majority of our inventory does support viewability for both of those vendors. And once this open source SDK rolls out, it'll enable us then to add other viewability partners, all the other major partners in 2018. So it's a great step forward, and I'm so happy that the IAB AdTech Lab now is driving this for the industry. Okay, so we have another poll question, which I will push to you. And Bob, you may want to give instructions on how to answer the poll.
Yeah, apparently if you're viewing the poll question or viewing this slide presentation in full screen, you may not get the prompt. So take it out of full screen mode and you'll be able to answer the question. But Ann, do you want to read the question and get people going?
Sure. Are your mobile video ads always under 15 seconds and specifically tailored for mobile? And then there's options. Yes, definitely. No, I use what I have. Sometimes it's available, unsure. So it'll be interesting to see whether sometimes people have 15-second creatives or not at all. Okay, so hopefully people have had a chance to see.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm going to push the question answers right now for everybody to see where we're at.
Perfect. So, so it's so great to see that less than a third of people said no, they never have those assets and they use what they have. So that's obviously been a big change over the last 12 months or so, that increasingly people do have available 15-second or kind of mobile-specific creative. So great to see that change out in the industry. Okay, so we're going to move on now to go through some of the mobile optimized creative and interactive video formats that we're seeing out there. So obviously, always fun to look at creative and learn some of the best practices and examples that are out there. So I'll go to the okay, so this is actually first up, we're going to cover metrics that matter section, and then we'll go into the creative formats after that. So we're switching to the end of this deck. Unless you guys, well, that's fine. We'll cover this first. So I wanted to give a sense of what benchmarks we're seeing, and I think, Michael, you can feel free to chime in as well. But some of the metrics that we see people measuring against are clearly on video completion rates for video. And those completion rates, as we talked about, for 15 seconds are ranging between 75 and 85%. And then for 30 seconds, unless you really have your media partner optimize these against completion rates as the goal, you will naturally see between 40 and 50% completion rates. So either make sure your advertisers that you're working with understand the difference in that 30-second creative, or you work with your media partners to actually optimize to higher completion rates of what you would typically see with 30 seconds. You can get this to be kind of 60, 70% range if you optimize the media that you buy.
Right, and the latency that we saw earlier introduced on the front end, in some cases by VPaid, is going to typically directly impacts the completion rate, right? So if it takes longer to start, that gives people time to close it. If there's a close button, it also frustrates people a bit, so they may say forget about it. So definitely having an experience that's pre-cached and loadable instantaneously is a great advantage for boosting completion rates.
And it's a great question for partners. If you use VAST, will those creatives be fully pre-cached so that there's a buffer-free experience? All right, so the next metrics we'll talk about is around viewability. So we covered this, how with in-app inventory now, VAST can support viewability metrics. This is a look, we'll show both Moat and IAS InMobi metrics. So this is a comparison of InMobi viewability metrics to the overall in-app video viewability rates that Moat is seeing. InMobi's video creatives, and we'll look at those creatives at the end in terms of examples, are full screen experiences. And so for those full screen experiences with no clutter, it's only one page, ad on the page, we are seeing 90% plus on viewability rates on the InMobi exchange. And that's obviously quite a bit higher than overall in-app, which is likely incorporating some of the in-feed placements that are also available on the in-app side. The one thing I would say, and we'll talk a little bit about this, is in terms of best practices on the creative, is audio is not always going to be the experience that consumers have on their devices. We can certainly optimize the delivery of campaigns to areas where the publishers have settings where the sound is on or it's autoplay experiences. But even in that, even when we do that, you will see anywhere from around a third of consumers who really mute their phones. So just like on television, people do obviously mute their TVs, people do mute their phones. So one, obviously, increasingly good practice is to figure out what does my video say for the brand? How do I make sure that I have visuals that obviously entice people to want to turn on sound, but also get my message across visually without sound being a component of that experience? And then I'll look at the next set of metrics on IAS. There's a lot of other metrics in the Moat dashboard. We tend to have people use the video, the IAB kind of MRC accredited definition of viewability, or some metrics that incorporate AVOC that may be specific to the holding companies. And then this is a look at InMobi's viewability metrics from the IAS standpoint. IAS does not yet release an in-app industry benchmark. As we mentioned, InMobi was the first in-app mobile video player to work with IAS and support IAS viewability metrics using VAST. And this is where we're seeing it's pretty much in line with what you see for remote viewability. So it's around that 90% benchmark. And this is a bit of an apples to oranges comparison because we're comparing this to the IAS desktop viewability metrics. But this does speak to how powerful those full screen video experiences are on the in-app side. And we'll see some of those examples in the next section when we cover mobile optimized creative. So Mike, I'll hand this over to you to talk about some of the other metrics and benchmarks that we're seeing.
Sure. I mean, so this is just about click-through rate, which, I mean, in all honesty, is not necessarily a metric that we are completely gung-ho about, especially in mobile, where it will take people completely away from the whole experience of both the ad and the app, and so it may make sense rather than driving people to a site to think about, well, what aspects of the site can I actually bring into the unit and recreate there, and still, do whatever tracking or do whatever actions that I would like to do on the site. But if you want to do click-through rate, and certainly there's lots of valid reasons to want to do that, we do see a better performance of click-through on interactive versus standard for mobile. And I think, a lot of people have a concern, I think, with click-through rates specifically on mobile of being like, oh, maybe that's just accidental because I just tapped it and I just hit the video. Honestly, and I mean, Ann, you can talk more specifically about your own experience, but I do feel like most mobile providers have worked that out and can give you some assurances. They've been smarter about how they handle click-throughs. They have some sort of confirmation dialogue, or it sits on a Learn More button, or there's some way in which they guard against sort of accidental click-throughs, right? And if you're exceptionally worried about that, you could always implement it as an overlay so that there's only a certain specific part of the screen that's absolutely clickable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty funny that over the last, 5 years, we've spent a ton of data sciences resources and creative resources really making sure to try to decrease click-through rates to what we consider to be the most valid engagements from consumers. So kind of overcoming what I think some people used to call the fat fingers or accidental clicks kind of world. I think it also indicates, Michael, your first step that, people don't always look at click-through rate as a quality metric, especially on video, where I think the focus is now been more on viewability, audio experiences, engagement, time spent, completion rates, video completion rates in general as kind of more quality metrics than just click-through rate.
Yeah, and I can vouch for the fact that these numbers used to be not specific to InMobi, but these numbers used to be way, way higher. I remember on the very first campaigns that we ran on mobile, we saw 60% click-through rates on some of the very first ones, and we stopped having a click-through on mobile at all for that reason. But I think that was like 3 years ago, and I really feel like it sounds like you guys have fixed it, and I feel like most publishers in the ecosystem have addressed that at this point, don't want to have accidental clicks, and so I think hopefully that's not an issue we should be too worried about.
Yeah, so I think the focus on some of the campaigns is definitely more downstream conversion metrics, and obviously for that we need to make sure we're engaging the right folks. All right, so I'll go to the next metrics that matter. We talked a little bit about audio, and on average for InMobi, we are seeing about 60% on the ABOC rate. I'm not sure how many people really look at this. There are certain holding companies really focused on their own metrics that aren't exactly the same as ABOC. But it is interesting that if you have clients that are very focused on audio being a core part of those metrics and really a necessary part of the experience for getting the impact that you want from the campaign, there are ways to really optimize against this metric. even with that optimization, though, consumers still will have the option of turning the audio off on their phone. So we do see about a third of consumers that, even when we kind of optimize the experience, that they may mute their phone as well. And then, obviously, as we were talking about with click-through rate, I think people are building in now, and we'll talk about this example again, but this is an example of a horizontal video where after that video plays, you'll get a horizontal, in this case, end card. And that end card, obviously, in this case, is really built around time spent and full engagement metrics. And it's really a bespoke creative that's a rich media kind of experience after the video plays. And these end card experiences in general, I think, will become a creative best practice. And we'll give you more examples of that. I'm hoping to see that a majority, if not all, mobile video campaigns that support end cards, that the clients do use this end card experience. In the example here, right, you won't impact your video completion rate or your viewability metrics for the video itself, but after that video plays, you'll give consumers a chance to engage further. And that call to action can be either more engagement with the brand, which is what it is in this case, where you can change your contact lenses on this model to different colors, or it could be some kind of other downstream kind of metric that you may want, some other call to action. And we see pretty high engagement now on these end cards, but not all clients are taking advantage of that kind of incremental value that's available from some of your partners. Okay.
Yeah, and once again, these can be delivered via VAST. So here you have basically a fully interactive and or dynamic unit that's been delivered via VAST, which is pretty interesting. And another great thing, I mean, this format actually also already has a pretty fair amount of adoption in the industry. I would say that many have not, I would say it has like 80% adoption in the sense that many big providers are 80% of the way there of being able to fully support it. InMobi, once again, has been one of the first to kind of go the whole way and make sure that we can measure all the metrics that we need to in that end card. But I think we will see absolutely, hopefully, more adoption of this. We've also pushed support for actually buying this specific format into OpenRTB so that it actually can be specifically bought in programmatic once adoption of OpenRTB 2.5 is fully adopted. So we're really prepping, hopefully, to see this format do more in the future.
Yeah, so we'll give some more examples. So this is an example of a vertical video with end card that has both a carousel placement for more engagement, but also tune in, right? Go ahead and go to Netflix and watch this show. So it has the call to action on the end card. So what you're seeing on the left is that video play. At the end of that video, it'll go to this end card experience. And in general, we're seeing anywhere from 5% to 70% of consumers engage with the end card. On kind of average, it's around 15% of people that'll further engage on the end card experience. So this is one example of a vertical end card.
I would like to interrupt real quick with a technical support issue. For those of you who are not able to view the videos, you need to enable Flash on your browser, and that will take care of the problem. Go ahead, Ann. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh my gosh, is Flash still alive? Anyway.
Yes, it is.
All right, so this is, hopefully folks can see this example of vertical video on the left side, and then at the end on the right, there'll be a end card. And so we can actually work with Innovid to support the use of these end cards and dynamic matters, but I do hope that more people use them. And you may want to talk, Michael, about some uses that you see for these end card experiences.
Yeah, I mean, so we've already been running some. It's really nice, honestly, to be able to present dynamic experiences as well as interactive experiences at the end card, and being able to layer on top of those dynamic experiences data that may be only available on mobile. So specifically, some sort of hyper-local or local offer where you have, like, let's say, a dealer locator for auto, or a store locator for CPG or retail. And honestly, the nice thing is you can basically execute anything that you could execute in what you would normally think of as a full interactive unit, and it's just being delivered as a vast companion. Another good thing is that frequently these can be implemented so that even if the video is skippable, the end card will still show up, and the user then has to take an action to dismiss it, right? So this is something where if you have an offer that you definitely want people to see, it's a great opportunity to basically stop them for a second and make sure that they see it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Michael. So, I mean, you've bought this whole screen, and you have an option from many people now to have an incremental way to get the next call to action or an incremental way to engage folks. So hopefully people will start supporting the use of all these end cards with the video creatives. So this example we saw in the Metrics That Matter section, it's just a horizontal example where that end card experience is an engagement, kind of bespoke, more bespoke creative experience. Okay, and I will go to the next example, which is really about going vertical. So we'll look at this. This is a split screen example that we saw earlier, and the end card here could be about really trying HBO free trial, right? So this call to action is available on the split screen up front. So some more direct response advertisers will use this where video is really being used to entice people to get interested in the offer. But both on that split screen up front as well as on the end card, they're making sure to kind of bring in whatever the core call to action and goal of the campaign is. So hopefully the key takeaway on some of the mobile optimized formats is to leverage more end card experiences and bring those in addition to kind of going vertical. So we have one more poll to complete. I've put the questions up. So today I include mobile in-app video as part of my multi-channel video campaigns. We're very curious to see the results on this. If people know whether they've used in-app within their mobile mix or whether they're just focused on, have been running mobile web video campaigns. So, and none of the time, some of the time, all of the time are unsure. So not everyone obviously has access to the division of what they're running in mobile that's in-app or mobile web. So some people may not know, but very curious to get the results. Okay, I'll move over to results. Hopefully that people have had time to fill in the poll. Well, this is good news. Wow, even some of the times, all of the time. Wow, it's exciting. But fewer and fewer folks out there, so only 14 to 15% of folks haven't run mobile in-app video. So hopefully when you've seen these examples of the great full screen experiences that are available, that are kind of personal television commercials, folks will start testing those out. So we'll go ahead and conclude and give you guys some takeaways on what we've learned and some of the lessons, and then we'll open it up for Q&A after that. So some of the best practices that we've talked about is that you can use VAST and that it will support viewability for in-app video. And this really will improve your performance and give consumers a buffer-free experience for your videos so they're not frustrating users to wait through a couple seconds of delay. Keep the video short if at all possible. Obviously, everyone in the industry is running 30-second videos and can support that and optimize for the right performance metrics. But ideally, folks continue to develop more 15 seconds. And we saw that really has gone up from the poll that we took today. So that's great to see and examples of that. And then using some mobile call to actions. We are seeing people promote kind of download an app or deep linking into app experiences, visit nearby stores, click to call experiences. To the extent that call to actions are available that are really specific to the mobile device, those tend to have higher conversions, of probably 2x higher than when it's really leading to a mobile web store or some kind of e-commerce experience outside of the app. And then deliver mobile-only experiences. I mean, we talked a lot about going vertical, even if you don't have vertical video assets. I think both Innovid and InMobi, as well as others in the industry, have great ways to help you kind of make those experiences vertical so that you're using the full size of the screen, which is obviously 4x higher on visual impact that's available. And since you've bought the full screen, you might as well be able to use it for your clients. And then we talked about the benchmarks. So hopefully these benchmarks help so that you know, okay, how are my campaigns doing against this? What are the goals I should be setting with some of my clients in terms of what they can expect and what should I expect from my media partners. So, and we've shared all the InMobi metrics of kind of 75% plus on video completion rates for 15-second creatives with ways to get close to that on 30 seconds if you kind of scale down the reach. 90% plus on viewability for these full screen video units. And then the use of end cards really helping people drive an additional value proposition beyond the video completion rates. And we're seeing on average 15% of people really engaging with those end cards. So we'll go ahead and open it up for Q&A. And I'll hand it over to you, Bob, for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're now ready to open the floor for your questions. As a reminder, to participate in our Q&A, just type your question into the Ask a Question text area, then click the Submit button. And I've got a question here to start off. This is for Michael, I think. You mentioned the VAST SDK is the best tech option for mobile, but how can an individual user make sure that they're spending on partners that use that technology if they're buying programmatically? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you need to know who the inventory provider is on the back end. And I think this is frequently a point of confusion in the industry, at least for many people, is they're used to dealing with DSPs or trading desks, and they don't necessarily know, okay, who's the back-end inventory provider. And I'm speaking as someone who doesn't work as a media industry, so maybe this is not as confusing as I'm making it out to be. But I think it's just a question of asking the inventory provider. Typically it's a PMP deal with somebody like an InMobi who is fully compatible. And so it's just a question of finding those providers that are fully compatible, and I think you'll see more and more announcements from companies being fully compatible, both with, first off, with the SDK for the sake of viewability and verification, but then I think we will also hopefully start to see more and more inventory providers following InMobi's lead here and trying to do more with VAST as an option to VPaid. And honestly, we've far from given up on VPaid. We still do quite a bit with VPaid, and I think that's a separate initiative to try to see what we can do to improve VPaid or come up with another set of standards. But I do think for immediate market needs, this VAST with the SDK solution is an excellent one, and it may end up being the long-term winner. We'll just have to see. For now, as someone who works with many partners from an advertising perspective, many agencies and advertisers, we are working with both VPaid and VAST, but I think this VAST solution is an excellent one.
Yeah, and I think one question you can just ask media. I mean, you can clearly ask them if their viewability solution is part of their SDK. The other way to ask that question is just, are you using an MRC accredited methodology for your viewability metrics? And the MRC accredited methodology does require an SDK integration rather than the publisher sending on an API signals that the publisher themselves is kind of touching, and that's not MRC accredited. So those are probably good questions up front.
Great, that's awesome. Let me go to the next question. What will be the scenario after the autoplay restriction? Do you think users will click to play every video? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as I know, the autoplay restriction is not applicable here because the autoplay restriction is primarily a web restriction, right, run by the browser. So this is the benefit of an SDK-based approach. And Mobi has native software that's playing the video, and as such, they control that experience. There's no autoplay restriction. Am I right there, Ann?
That's correct. And this brings up a great point, is that in-app mobile inventory is the first example of a scaled, true native connected device experience. So there are going to be more and more digital media experiences that aren't browser-based, right? You think about OTT, you think about cars, you think about watches. The way to really do these experiences right is to use the capabilities for that connected device that may not be in the browser. And so for in-app mobile video inventory, we're really using a pure native experience, native not just in look and feel, but from the technology of the device itself, in order to make sure that that consumer experience is absolutely seamless. And so that's the case around this autoplay.
Taking this further about the different formats that are going on in video, there's a really interesting question here about the 6-second ad format. How is the 6-second ad format performing, Ann? Is it better than the 15-second ad unit at this point, or is it performing just about the same?
We don't have enough of them for me to give stats. Most of the creatives we're seeing today are 30-second or 15-second creatives. So we're not seeing enough people with 6-second creatives yet to actually look at the averages on completion rates. I'd expect completion rates will go up. That is the trend you see on shorter videos. I think it's going to be interesting how it plays out, at least on the inventory we have. I'm almost expecting there may be ways that over the course of time we enable advertisers to have two 6-second videos, right, rather than a 15-second video. So we'll see, and it's almost more like a television break with multiple commercials within that time. So we'll see how that plays out, but I don't have an average yet for 6-second creatives.
Can you add anything to that, Michael, or any thoughts?
No, I mean, I would say exactly the same thing. I mean, honestly, we're not running enough scale of 6-second creative to do that. I think that there's a handful of partners who've really been, media partners who've been pushing for 6-second video in the market, and I imagine most of the 6-second video is currently going there. We don't at this point see that enough 6-second media to make sort of that judgment. I mean, it's going to be an automatic trend, though, that you would imagine you'd see more completion, right? The shorter you get, the harder it is, honestly, to not complete. So,
yeah, I would imagine so. It's kind of hard not to complete 6 seconds. Let me get to a clarification question. Michael is asking for a definition of what standard video click-through rate is. Like when you say a standard video click-through rate, what are you basing that number on?
Yeah, so I think I can see the question here. It has standard in quotes, so I assume it's mostly about, well, what do I mean by standard? I mean, standard is just something, as opposed to interactive. So that's all it was, as opposed to interactive. It's just regular old video.
Just regular old video. I get it. Okay, that's fantastic. Next up, what are the major trends in mobile video that you think we'll see in Q4 and into 2018? I'd love to get both of your impressions on this one. And what do you see as the big trends going into the next year?
Well, I mean, we started seeing it already, and even in the poll question you can see that, and I think it will continue. I think this move to vertical experiences has really caught on. I mean, we are running, and more people even have vertical video assets. So we are running a lot more vertical video campaigns already. It's still not a majority of the video creatives that we're getting, But certainly we see that increasing. Every week we're getting more asks for people being able to run vertical video campaigns with us. So that I see as an ongoing trend and an increased trend. I hope I see almost all video ads that we run at least supporting and using end cards. It's really a win-win for the advertisers. You don't lose any of, there's no downside on the video completion rate, and you enable consumers who are interested to take a step further, spend more time with the brand, go to the next level wherever you want to, lead them in terms of a call to action. So hopefully we'll see that trend picking up. I haven't seen that as soon now, but I do expect that through 2018.
Yeah, it's surprising it's not happening faster, considering that it's such an important trend going forward. Michael, anything to add?
Yeah, so I'm personally really excited about mobile video moving into 2018. We mostly deal with brand advertisers, and I think we're really seeing 2018 shape up as, I've heard a lot about the year of video, or year of mobile. But I think next year is going to be a great year for mobile video, because up to this point we've had I think a lot of brand advertisers have kind of backed off and stayed out of the space because there were things that were missing. So in particular, the fact that verification and viewability are now going to be added to the SDK, hopefully at scale, and we'll start to see a lot more scale for VAST that has viewability and verification. I also think the fact that we finally are saying goodbye to Flash means you'll have a prevalence of HTML VPAID, which means all of a sudden it is possible to run cross-platform tags. It's also possible for a VAST perspective. And then the interactivity, these sort of new initiatives, a lot of people complain that there haven't been enough sort of mobile-specific interactive formats or enough formats that really take advantage of mobile. I think there's a lot of factors that are pushing the industry towards mobile. Just the sheer number of people that are there, the fact that people aren't installing as many apps as they used to means people who used to be doing performance advertising, from an inventory provider standpoint, are going to have to move towards brand advertising. So I think we're going to see a lot of people, we'll see a lot more interest from brand advertisers, we'll see a lot of gaps closed for brand advertisers, and we'll see a lot more inventory providers moving to provide whatever additional functionality is needed in order to make brand advertisers happy on mobile. And I think what InMobi is doing here is clearly a great step in that direction.
Brand safety is another issue that a lot of people are worried about these days. And this is a question for Ann. What can be done to ensure programmatic video campaigns are brand safe?
Yeah, I think one of the first steps has clearly been supporting third-party verification services. So you can get into your dashboards now, obviously, invalid traffic metrics that are verified from the third party with the support of all these viewability tags. So I think that's a great first step. The other thing we make sure to do with clients is review all of the apps that they'll run on, and then set up the PMPs on a whitelist for all of that inventory. Clearly, all the inventory that we have is completely transparent in the ecosystem. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done. A lot of other initial brand safety capabilities in the industry have been based on browser technologies, on crawling. So the reason you really have to do this kind of manual review of the apps is, obviously you can't crawl in an app experience. So we are trying to work on the next generation of more sophisticated models. But for now, I think those are probably the best practices, which is making sure to run on completely transparent inventory and review of those apps, and then use of viewability and verification capabilities, whether you're on the direct response side with your analytics partners or on the brand side with viewability.
Well, we've got time for one last question, and it's about viewability. Is this viewability metric as per the Group M standards? Can someone provide a little bit of clarification?
Sure, no problem. So We do support at InMobi the Group M standards that you run for viewability. So we run today moat campaigns against Group M metrics. Those weren't shared in those screenshots on the metrics, but the difference is that those measurements are obviously a bit higher than the AVOC measurements. The difference obviously is that AVOC is measured at audio on completion, whereas the Group M standard is looking at audio throughout the play of the video. So some people may not mute their phone or stop listening to the audio towards the end, but they're going to be slightly higher numbers than those AVOC metrics in terms of where the Group M standards are hitting.
Well, fantastic. And with that, we've reached the end of our time. Thank you for attending AdAge's custom webcast sponsored by InMobi. You can also view and listen to this presentation on demand using the same link you used to attend today. You will receive an email as soon as the archive is complete and ready. On behalf of our guests, Ann Frisbie from InMobi and Michael Tuminello from Innovid, thank you for your time and have a great day.